introductions and just really set the stage for our panel today. Everyone, thank you so much for coming and taking the time to join. My name is Jennifer Dixon. I am the founder of JD Solutions Group, a sales and marketing consulting firm in the senior living space. And I'm really excited today to host a pretty amazing panel on the future of senior living sales, and where really a reflection and roundtable discussion on all of the challenges that we've all faced, and how we're overcoming it and positioning ourselves for the future. So I'm very excited today to introduce our panelists. And before I get started and give them the opportunity to share a little bit about themselves, I do want to let everybody know Carlene Motto was due to be one of our panelists today, and most unfortunately, her daughter was diagnosed with COVID and is probably on her way right now into the hospital. So Carlene is taking this time right now to obviously be with her family, true family emergency. I know many of the people on this call know Carlene and love her as we all do. So please send her your best wishes and thoughts. And I'm sure Carlene and I had so much to talk about as all four of us talked on this panel. So I'm sure we'll be able to kind of put a discussion out together in the future. But so we thank Carlene, and we're thinking of her. So I'm excited to introduce our first panelist, Andrew. And Andrew, I'm going to hand it over to you and let you share a little bit about yourself and your company with the group.
Thanks, Jennifer. And without Carlene here, I guess maybe Jason and I get downgraded from a pretty amazing panel to just a decent panel. So our thoughts go out to her and her daughter. My name is Andrew Chapin. I'm the Vice President of Sales and Marketing for Integrated Real Estate Group. We are a full service real estate company. So we have a development team who takes raw dirt, rezones it, gets it ready, hands it off to our construction team who builds the brick and mortar community. And we've got an operational team under the name Integrated Senior Lifestyles who sees that asset to stabilization. So a lot of our, we go through the full, birth to raising process. It's like our raising a bunch of children, I guess, in terms of our communities. So my specific role is mainly focused on the revenue side of things in terms of running sales and marketing for our senior side, but also our multifamily side. And since we're a bit of a lean organization, I also help a little bit on the development side of things too, because while right now we are a regional player focused mainly on Texas, we are looking at aggressively pursuing other markets in the near future. So excited to get started today, and I'll hand it over to Jason.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Jen. My name is Jason Moorehead. I'm the Vice President of Sales and Marketing for Revera. We're an operator based in the Canadian marketplace with properties right across the country. My role with the organization is on our retirement side of the business. I look after all of the revenue generating activities. So right from the very beginning of our journey, from a marketing perspective, all the way through the sales perspective to the move-in is where our focus is in the Canadian marketplace.
Great. Well, thank you both so much. So I was really excited to be able to put this panel together, and you both have, just such unique perspectives. So I think this will be a really helpful discussion for everyone. For all of you who are here and who are listening, we have the chat open, and if you have questions, please feel free to throw them right in the chat, send them up, share it out with everybody, and we will address your questions live as we're going through and having this discussion. I have a few questions in particular that I'll be posing to Andrew and Jason, so we'll see where the conversation goes. But the first one that I'm going to put out to you, Andrew. I'm going to put you on the spot. So the biggest sales challenge, when you're thinking about everything that you've been faced with in 2020, what was the biggest sales challenge that your organization faced, and what did you learn from it?
Very good question. You couldn't have given me a softball to start?
Supposed to be the easy one.
Right. I would say above all, the biggest challenge would be one of mindset. So we've had sales teams that have been with us for several years, and they're used to a certain level of success, right? The best salespeople are naturally competitive, and they may view it as a failure if their particular community dips below a certain occupancy level. And so having to shift that mindset from, hey, as a company, we care less about whether you're 97%, 95%, or dare I say 89% right now. What matters more is, are you and the staff and the residents safe and healthy? That's really the number one objective during this time. And so really that mindset shift has been the most difficult part, right? Because we've got a lot of type A, highly competitive people in our organization, which are great. I think the second part of that was what did we learn from it? And so far, I think the biggest heartwarming takeaway is that we've got a lot of grit, not only within our company, but within the industry.
Yeah.
So I would say from a sales perspective, sales teams have really risen to the challenge, right? We've been faced with a lot of obstacles, not only the virus itself, right, which is, a health and physical concern, but also the court of public opinion turned against the industry immediately during this, right? So we've had a PR issue to deal with as well. And our sales teams really are first and foremost the faces of our communities and therefore our industry. And so they've really risen to the challenge, which has been just excellent to see.
Yeah. I think it's what you're touching on there, the grit and the rising to the challenge. I mean, there's so much resilience, I think, that we've seen in the industry. And there's a really, really good comment here. There's lots of comments coming in the chat, but this one comes from Amanda. She's saying, Andrew's right on. And as a sales director, she's felt, had this feeling, and I think we've all felt this at some point, like I'm failing because I can't make those COVID fears disappear. And it's so true, Amanda. It's not anything anyone could have planned for, but I think that, as people who are, in sales, and our role is to communicate and help people, that feeling like you're failing when you're not able to help people or meet the metrics or the goals that you're trying to meet is really tough. So Andrew, is that something that, Andrew and Jason, I mean, is that something that you're kind of what Amanda's talking about there, like sales teams feeling like they're failing sometimes?
Well, just before I hand it over to Jason, you're not failing, Amanda. You're doing is that keep fighting the good fight.
Yeah, I would certainly agree. Again, and Andrew's point, the sales team is typically very competitive. The onset of this pandemic had such a significant impact so quickly in the marketplace. I found, we certainly went from a very offensive position to a very defensive position, and in certain marketplaces, the sector itself took significant challenges through media, and so it really got to that stage of defending the health and safety of our residents, the health and safety of our staff and frontline workers. And as we've come out of this, it's really navigating these new waters, and certainly numbers aren't where they are, and that can lead to a sense of failure, but it's understanding new ways and learning new ways, and certainly overcoming a lot of the challenges from a PR perspective, but also answering the new questions that these customers have that are thinking about retirement and potentially considering whether they stay at home a little bit longer or move in, and really being able to answer the questions honestly and openly to them about what would happen should they move into that retirement residence.
Right, definitely. And I think being able to answer those openly and honestly is really important. So anything else in terms of just the opening question, Jason, that you want to add from that in terms of what you and what your organization have learned from some of these initial challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, it's interesting as we've come out. Like I say, we jumped really quickly into a defensive strategy of, you know, our customers from a marketing channel all the way through to sales channel. They just weren't interested in someone trying to sell, and there was a lot going on. Certainly took that opportunity to build relationships, and now it's navigating new waters. And you know, I found when we came out, there's that sense, that competitive sense comes in naturally to many people in sales. And you know, the first thought that everybody has is, how can I be the quickest? How can I be first to do this and first to do that and overcome? And I think our biggest learning curve, I think, as an organization has certainly been to make sure that we're addressing the needs of our customers first, and as well as our residents. You know, and instead of trying to work around the newly imposed restrictions, I think it's a matter of how do you work those in and make sure that there's a safe transition for our customers into a residence, as well as keeping the safety of those residents first of mind at all times.
Right.
Just a bit of a different mindset, so a little less competitive, but it's tough, but certainly the smart way of doing it.
Yes, definitely. I think so. And I think that there's lots of good comments coming in, trying to keep up with them a little bit here. Mike Miller, thanks for your shout out there. Grit is a fantastic word to describe sales teams. And Shelley Webster there, this is a good segue cue here, where she's saying, so mindset is definitely important, and really finding ways to build relationships virtually and truly getting creative with purposeful follow-up and follow through. All right, Shelley, amen to all of that. And with that, what I'd like to do is I'd actually like to launch a poll out to all of you right now about virtual selling. So you should see this pop up in front of you. And the question is, we've all been selling virtually throughout 2020, and how do you feel about the virtual tour and sales process? So go ahead, answer real time. I promise it's anonymous. Nobody's gonna see your answers, but we're just gonna show, oh, this is exciting. All right, about half of you have voted. It's like, drum roll, please. Oh, wow. I'm seeing a balance here between loving it and kind of wishing going back to face. All right, so let's go ahead. I'm going to share the results with all of you. Okay, so the answer to the poll, 46% of you, this is out of everyone who voted, said, I love it. Why weren't we doing this before? There's a few of you who like it, but aren't quite comfortable. And about 31% is, feeling like, I prefer we go back to doing everything face to face. And there are 2 people who hate it. So that's I think that's a pretty diverse group of answers there. I think it's neat to see. And I guess that leads to the next question. And Jason, I'll start with you.
Sure.
How have you seen the sales process change? And how has that impacted, what you're measuring for success and the type of training you're providing? So, what have you seen in terms of changes to the sales process?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, even looking at lead generation from a marketing lens, we've certainly identified different stages within our funnel that we position our customers at through their journey, and certainly finding a lot more people are in and around that education stage. They want to learn a lot more. They're asking different questions. And certainly, as an organization, we're having to answer questions we haven't had to answer before. a lot to do with safety, but also a lot to do with that sense of freedom and what sort of restrictions might be imposed if they were to move in. So I would say that the first change in our sales process has to be the length, for sure. We're spending a lot more time communicating with the customers, building that trust, and educating them on what it is that we're doing, what it is that from as far back as just discussions around congregate living all the way down to supportive living and what types of things that our specific organization is doing as well. From our sales process, obviously those communications, depending on what marketplace they're in, there's different government restrictions. So looking at different ways to get that face-to-face if it's appropriate, and certainly managing through. But even if we do get to that stage of having someone visit us at the residence, it's a different process. And I think it's very important to put ourselves in the shoes of our customers that don't see this every day. And you know, they're coming to, you know, what's a very clinical looking feel right now. And you know, you go to a residence, and it's very important that we keep up with the communication so that we're not scaring them off and you know, overwhelming them with all of these things that are happening. So I think, you know, again, the length of the process is one thing. Number two is just the need that our customer has for that trust with you, and building that relationship ahead of time so that you can walk them through and make sure that they're choosing the right place for the right decisions.
Right. So Jason, I think, you know, you hit on a lot of different things there, but I was, you know, just thinking back to some of our discussions, and you know, some of the things you were talking about, just the funnel and how many more people are sitting in the education stage, you know, but specifically, I think, you know, we had talked a little bit about, you know, suggestions or recommendations for training. And I remember we were talking a little bit about, you said, you know, kind of walking that critical path daily to, you know, kind of look at what is the experience like for the person who might be walking in the building. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I think there's a lot, it's a small detail, but it's huge.
For sure, yeah. And I hope, I'm sorry, I'm in a hotel and someone's car alarm is going off behind me, so I hope.
I can't hear it.
Okay, good. Tells you what kind of hotel I stay in, I guess. But yeah, certainly, you know, from that critical path, it's very important. And from a training perspective, I think there's two things that are so important. There's one, I'm sure everybody has had an influx of people reaching out, offering online training and online, you know, different webinars to train your sales team. And you know, we've always taken the approach of training on two sides. Number one, the senior living selling, but also number two, the actual true sales training is always important. And one of the things we focus on a lot is that customer experience that they receive when they go to the residence level. And it's walking that, you know, the critical path. It's what the process that you're taking as that customer is coming through. In our marketplace, active screening is required. So before entrance into a residence, you know, you're greeted by somebody who is full PPE, and they're asking you all sorts of questions and taking your temperature, and it's very overwhelming. And so from a sales perspective, we really challenge the team back to work together and find new ways of creating a better experience. And potentially that's, you know, meeting the customer outside and walking them through that and making sure that we're looking at it from their lens. We're looking at the residence level inside from their lens, and making sure that it's not too clinical looking, to make sure that we still keep in mind the importance of having the residents ready for a sales event or a tour.
Sure. Andrew, what do you think?
I'll start with the training aspect, because that is definitely one thing that as an organization, especially on the senior housing side, we've sort of taken that and kind of dumped it on the table to rebuild it, because a lot of our a lot of our philosophy was face to face. You know, we're still a small enough organization where we can have, well, our goal is to train somebody in person. So having to answer the question of, well, what do we do now that kind of goes away as an option, forced us to rethink a lot of things. But, you know, when you think about constraints, they typically make you better. And so we've looked through virtual platforms. We've looked through kind of online learning terminals, peer interactions. We've even, and I guess shameless plug for our host, Jen Dixon here, but I even had, as soon as she went solo, I called her and asked her to speak with my corporate director of sales, Allison, to see if there was anything we were missing. Because there's power in, you know, opening up your network every now and then to see if there's anything that we've been overlooking. Because again, this is something nobody's ever really encountered before. So we wanted to make sure we weren't being left behind in any certain areas.
Yeah, and there's a good comment coming in here from Brigitte saying, she's saying, I think it's important for companies to understand how their sales teams respond to technology and sync resources into getting them comfortable. And I think that, you know, what Brigitte is saying there is so important, because there's, at least, you know, from my vantage point, you know, I work with lots of operators, lots of different investment groups, and there's definitely a big difference in terms of organizations that aren't, you know, making that concerted effort to get sales teams comfortable in terms of, you know, even from just the very basics of how do you host a Zoom meeting like we are right now, you know, and really what that virtual experience is like. So I do, I think that's incredibly important.
Yeah, I think that's, go ahead, Andrew.
I was going to say that comment resonated with me as well. I was taking a look at that, and one example, I see we've got a representative from One Day on here as well. That's probably our best example of technology, which we assumed we could. I think we partnered with them about a year and a half ago, so we had runtime before the pandemic. But our initial assumption was, yeah, we'll throw this tool out there and everybody will naturally gravitate towards it. Not the case, right? We've got to make sure that we spend the time, as Brigitte's mentioned, to nurture that, to make sure that our teams are comfortable with using it and know how to effectively use it, which really paid off when we had to switch to more of a virtual video-based sales process.
Right.
Yeah, I certainly think that comment resonates very well, as you know, from an industry that I think was, you know, far more into the face-to-face, far more into the tour and having that type of interaction, potentially a sector thing and potentially based on what our customers are looking for. I find it amazing over the last 6 months how fast technology has taken over, and the willingness, not only from our own teams, but from our customer base, to accept technology and look for options like a virtual tour as being even something that they would consider. And I think from an organization perspective, I think we all got a bit of a hall pass, so to speak, in the first wave there of allowing us to have, you know, sloppy technology, or as sales teams being able to forgive me, I'm not good at this, but, you know, trying to show these videos out, but doing the best that we could under a circumstance that happened very quickly. But I believe, you know, strongly that we're going to have to, you know, move, and that the expectation from our customer will be to have a more polished look, to have that available at all times. I think a virtual tour is not something I really heard much in this industry prior to the pandemic, and I think it's going to become more of an element that stays with us for a long time.
Yeah. And there's another good question that just came through. It says it looks like it's from me, but this question is not from me. It looks like somebody is labeled as me in there. So tell us in the comments who you are, because you have a really good question. So here's the question, guys. How are you balancing the current realities of living in a community with the traditional values that teams are trained to sell and use to connect to prospects. Ooh. Wow. Wow. So I'm assuming what this question means by the current realities of there's just so many restrictions right now. Restrictions, limitations, precautions, all of that. And teams typically are trained to be able to, sell to a lot of those things. And now we can't necessarily show them anymore. So I think that's the question. If that's not what you're asking, feel free to write in the comments, but what do you both think about that?
I would say that as our consumer and the world just becomes more and more informed about what we are all going through, that changes the sales perspective, right? And so you have to be prepared as an organization to be able to address the concerns. It would have never crossed anybody's mind a year ago that, hey, yeah, I have to spend time talking about how we desanitize the clubhouse. But now that's what people want to know. So in terms of traditional sales approaches, I mean, we've just had, like every other industry, we've had to pivot, right? And sanitation methods, ways to keep infectious disease out of communities, that's become top of mind for our consumers, and they're not going to test the waters with us until we've met and addressed those concerns.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question here. We do train the sales teams to promote the lifestyle. We talk about not selling the physical assets of the building, but selling the lifestyle that happens within the residents. And it's very difficult. You can't invite them to events now. You can't bring them in. An industry norm, at least in our marketplace, was always, inviting them for a meal or something,
Mm-hmm.
to taste the food. And those are things that are under such restrictions. So it brings a different element. And I think, twofold. Number one is the perception potentially could be that that's not happening anymore. And I think, going back to our conversation about technology, that's where you can really use some of the technologies that are available to showcase that and send that to the prospects when they're at home. There's ways of incorporating them into events. We did a few different online sales events where we, would bring them in on one of these forums and let them participate in the bingo game or whatever event was going on at that time. So certainly using technology, and then to Andrew's point, it's showcasing how we're taking care of that customer. So as you're showing them these events that are going on and the activities that are happening, it's showing them that we're taking proper protocol, social distancing and sanitation in between, et cetera, to show to them that we're doing it and we're keeping you safe at the same time.
Yeah, and there was a brief silver lining in all this, and I think now's the right time to mention it. There's an article from Forbes. It was largely US based in its content, but it mentioned that as a society, we're shifting, especially Western society, shifting back from, we were as consumer-based communal prior, then we shifted to an individualistic mindset, and this pandemic is starting to shift people back to experiences and products and services that showcase and involve other people. We've realized as a society how important that is, and if there's one thing we could really say we sell in senior living, it's community, right? So that is a bright spot, in my opinion. It's going to bode well for us in the future.
Yes. And I think, I think that the only thing that I would add is, the thing that has not gone away, that has remained consistent, is the need to be able to truly connect with people as early in the process as possible. And what I mean by that is actually getting to know them and talking to them. So, before we talk about protocols, before we talk about all those different things, are we talking openly to adult children and prospective families about their concerns, their challenges, and not making assumptions about what we think they might think about us, but being able to ask them and to better understand. So I do think there's, there's all these amazing things in technologies, and the only thing I wanted to add is I don't think we should get away from or forget some of the core relationship building skills for our teams, which I know you guys, your organizations do such a wonderful job of. And there's more comments coming through here. Amanda, senior living sales job descriptions must be flexible in there. That absolutely. Yep. It's right next to other duties as assigned. Absolutely. Must be flexible. And Jacqueline, thank you so much for your comment there. My gosh. So Jacqueline sharing from her team there at Park. Our team believes that the prospect is safer to be part of the community bubble rather than staying at home and isolated. So I think, Andrew, this goes to some of what you were saying. You have to believe in what you're selling. And this is really good for those of you who might be reading this in here. Jacqueline just kind of like put a lot of golden nuggets in here. The most successful question is to ask how was their day-to-day prior to COVID and now? Jacqueline, these are all, I think, really, really good points. And I'll share one more here from Lori coming out. The biggest challenge is for the salesperson to be able to convey the feeling of a community when they're doing it virtually. She agrees with you, Jason, in terms of keeping everyone engaged. So it's really, I think, really amazing how agile and how much everyone has adapted. I'm going to put up, because we're going to move to our next question, because time flies by so quickly. But a hot topic that I'm going to share out in a poll with all of you is remote work. For some of you who are working in communities, remote working might not be an option, but we're curious to know what's your personal preference, because the remote work environment has really played in. So we'll give everybody just a minute. I see everybody is, this will be interesting. Got a lot of good votes here. All right, we're pretty well split. A couple more coming in. Give it just another minute or two. All right, I'm gonna end the poll and let's share this out. All right, so here's what the group says. 30% of you love working remotely. You think it should be here to stay. But a big portion of the group says, I like having the option, but nothing replaces face-to-face time. And 13% remote work. What is that? I'm in a community. So very interesting, a really hot topic right now. So I'm gonna throw this hot potato over to you guys. Remote work. Is this something that has been positive for you? Is it negative? Do you think it's here to stay? Talk to us a little bit about the impact of remote work.
Yeah, I'll get us started here. And if I know that there's been a lot of big companies, especially in the tech side, who've already come out and said, hey, we're either, like Microsoft came out and said, we're never going back to the office if individuals don't want to. They now have the option to permanently work remotely. Other big companies have said the same or said, hey, we're not going back in the office till mid-summer of 2021 at the earliest. So I'd be curious if people wanted to engage with the chat feature and just throw out for those maybe at the corporate level when their organizations have decided, if at all, when everybody is going to be back in the office. I'd be curious to know about that. In terms of my thoughts on remote work in general, I want to say pros and cons is the right and safe answer there. From my perspective, I've seen a slight drop off in collaboration between some of our major departments, which is always a tough thing. It's a different feel. I think the survey alluded to it. You get a different sense when you can just pop into somebody's office and talk face to face, as opposed to, oh well, I've got to, now I've got to call them, and when am I gonna have time to do that? I don't have 10 minutes. I was just gonna pop by real quick. But on the flip side of that, there's been a lot of resurgence in people realizing what's truly important in life, you know, being able to spend more time with family, friends, loved ones to an extent. So again, it's pros and cons. I tend to be in the category of, yeah, I think it's okay. I'd rather see everybody together in a safe way, of course.
Of course.
Certainly, I mean, for the purpose of this call and this industry, I think there's two sides. Number one, corporate side, you know, where most people have been working from home for quite some time. I think there's pros and cons. I know my teenage daughters like the pro of having an extra vehicle around the house, so they certainly are putting the miles on it. But you know, I agree with Andrew. There's a lot of collaboration that's probably lacking from a corporate perspective. This drug that we've all quickly become addicted to of team meetings or Zoom meetings, and it's back to back meetings that, you know, you lose that sense of planning time on our own, which is what we encourage our sales team to, at the residence level, to be spending time planning. And I think from a corporate perspective, we've lost that. I think from a residence level, you know, I certainly don't think many are working from home. Certainly non-salespeople have probably been working harder than ever at the residence, and you know, deserve a lot of credit for the hard work they're doing. Our sales team has been a bit more flexible, and I think that's just a natural with sales. And if you know, there's opportunity to work from a remote location and be more focused and in the sales zone, so to speak, and getting your work done, then that's certainly something you could do from a temporary perspective. But nothing, in my opinion, you know, the quicker we can get back to face is just, you know, a much better way in our industry to sell, to actually get that customer and get the face to face, for sure.
Interesting. And there's a good comment in the chat from Andrew at One Day where he's saying, you know, in working from home, collaboration software, like things like Slack, obviously Zoom, there's a lot of different platforms. Slack, Andrew, it's a super cool platform to be able to use for communication. But I think that is, you know, we are seeing those trends. And one of the most frequent questions that I get asked, I think of you know, sales leaders and teams is the idea of how do you coach and train and help people remotely. So, you know, you certainly see it's brought up a lot of questions of, you know, how can you help people remotely, and devoting resources to being able to do that. But also, you know, looking at the benefits of being able to be face to face too. You know, I think, Andrew, you started to allude to it a little bit when you were talking about the collaboration and the communication between departments. And that, you know, leads to our next question, which is how have you seen the relationship between sales, marketing, and operations, which, you know, could encompass clinical as well. How have you seen that relationship change in 2020?
Yeah. It's a really, really important question. So before I was on the sales and marketing side, I was originally on the operations side. So within our organization, I would say the lines between those four silos are more blurred than ever before. And on the site level, what we're seeing is the communities that we operate that have the most success are the ones that are the least siloed in those different departments. So it's our communities that have remained 95+% occupied are those not necessarily in the best markets, not necessarily the newest buildings or the nicest amenities, but they have solid teams that know how to communicate and work together. So I think that all of those components, all those different departments, all those cogs in the wheel that makes our community run, both at the site level and the corporate level, we're realizing more than ever before how critical each component is, right? You can use the analogy of a chair with multiple legs, and you know what happens when you saw off a chair, it's, you know, or a leg, it's no longer useful. That's the same case here.
I couldn't agree more. I think, you know, pre-pandemic, you know, my biggest partner in the organization was the person who runs our operations, and you know, if we aren't aligned and our teams aren't aligned, then you can't have a successful relationship. I think that one of the key factors that's come into play a lot more, and being in retirement living, you know, this wasn't as key of a relationship, but I think the aspect of clinical certainly comes into play a lot more now than it did before, and you know, I certainly have a ton of respect for our clinical team, and what they've had to do over the last 8 months is incredible, and certainly you know, looking from both a sales, marketing, and an operations perspective, I think the more we can support them and work together, you know, as a complete group, it's certainly making our recovery or our transition back to everyday life a lot easier. And I think it's very important that all these areas are aligned very, very closely.
Mm-hmm.
Right, definitely. And I think too, and this might, you know, may or may not be a hot button, but one trend that I've observed, or just, you know, the nature of everything that is happening, is looking at the role of sales and a salesperson, and looking at how the line is blurred between sales, marketing, and communications, just with the need of everything that is happening. So Jason, I mean, what do you think about that? I mean, you know, salespeople are, everyone in a community is tasked with so much, but this call is about sales. So I'm advocating for salespeople right now, and they've got to wear a lot of hats. You know, you've got the marketing component, you have communications, you have working with the referral sources. So how is that relationship? How are you seeing the relationship and the need for resources for sales and marketing? How are you guys handling that?
Well, yeah, it's budget season, so resources, we always want more resources, right? But you know, it's something we've focused on for a few years now, is aligning our sales and marketing team in particular. You know, it's not uncommon in any industry and in any company to, you know, have kind of you know, a marketing team and a sales team that have different visions, and it certainly became very important to us to bring that same vision together. I just can't see how they can work differently, and marketing has to truly understand, you know, the type of customer and where to find them, and the sales team has to be able to execute and you know, make sure that we're securing you know, the right number of those leads that come through. I think as it gets to a residence level, it becomes a lot more funneled down and focused on one particular person or two, depending on the size of the residence, and kind of a jack of all trades and part of it. So again, you know, as much as you know, you can implement a team type of an atmosphere with the regionals and the other residences in the area, that team working together, and capturing, understanding what your need is, and where you know, from a national perspective, you look more at that higher level of the branding and the high level engagement. But as it comes down to that sales level at the residence, it's truly, you know, where are the leads coming from, and the best leads for the best community partners to have. So it does fall, you know, on that sales leader at the residence level for sure, and it's a balancing act, and it's certainly. You know, we talk a lot about the health of our business, and understanding each individual business is important, to make sure you understand, you know, your how your business works, and make sure you're spending the right amount of time in the right areas to make sure you have success, not just in the current month, but potentially also in the next upcoming months as well.
Definitely.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, on our end, about 2 years ago, we started taking we realized marketing was changing far too rapidly to keep up with at each community level. And so we started bringing marketing efforts in-house at the corporate level, and freeing up more sales dedicated time for the on-site teams. And what we found, and I don't know why it took us this long to reach this epiphany was if you hire professionals and give them time to do their job and focus on sales, sales go up. So we've seen remarkable success in that, because I would say that Jason hit the nail on the head. The vision has to be there first and foremost. They have to be rowing in the same direction. But I would argue against anybody who thought marketing and sales were synonyms, because they couldn't be more different. But again, alignment is key because it all drives that top line.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because that, that it seems like it's just been, we even do it with titles. I was called a director of marketing for a long time. Those of you who know me know I don't have a whole lot of marketing skills. So, my skills are sales skills and relationship building skills. And I think you're absolutely right. It's this balance of looking at what resources do you bring in-house, and then, just recognizing that the path that the consumer takes now, it's not just as simple as, hey, they go on your website and they inquire and you pick up the phone and do a tour. There's so much potential now for digital engagement, and for those steps that people can take before they even come to the community or do that first virtual tour. So I think being able to, kind of as you're describing, Andrew, just looking at it strategically, of looking at, okay, how do we arrange those resources, really makes a lot of sense.
Yep. I don't know if anybody's seen Enquire's latest report, but let's see, year over year, September 20 to September 19, inquiries are only down 9%, according to their study. However, move-ins are down 20%, right. Which in my mind tells us, hey, the process, the sales timeline, it's the amount of touch points, that's all extending. There's more. And so that means more time in the selling zone is needed. We need to make sure we're spending more time with our prospects to make sure they're comfortable making a decision on our product.
I think that's certainly a trend that's going to stay. I know Jen, when you mentioned the digital aspect, the online aspect, I find that over the last few years, customers have, transitioned from arranging a visit or just walking in and learning from the sales consultant what senior living is all about. They're coming in a lot more educated. They're spending more time, and companies that are leading the way are changing what they have in the marketplace, and they're educating customers at different stages of the journey versus putting that all on the sales consultant. So the sales consultant has to, build that relationship and build the trust with that customer so they can engage on the stuff they're learning. And as they're questioning certain things that they're seeing on other websites and bringing that towards you, that's how the sales team is getting, a little more active higher up in that funnel, where they're answering those questions versus just getting them in and trying to close them as quick as possible. It's just, again, going back to the length of time, but also that trust, the connection you make with that customer. And I find that post-COVID, there's a sense in every industry, and I don't know of many industries that haven't seen a decline in sales throughout the period of lockdown and into the summer months. There's a desperation that you can feel from a lot of sales teams. And I think that's something that will certainly scare away our customers. They don't want to be sold.
Yeah.
This always was a major decision. Now it's even a bigger decision, and you have to have that ability to, although you're anxious, and to the beginning of our conversation, super competitive to get that close, you have to build that relationship where you're going to push them away.
Right.
Very true.
Well, and I think my final question for both of you is focused on, what are your predictions for the future of senior living sales? What's here to stay, what's to come? So, kind of what are your closing thoughts on trends and implications for the future of sales in our industry?
Go ahead, Jason.
Who's gonna say?
Great one. Well, I think my nearsighted prediction is I don't think we're over yet. I certainly think there's more to come, and I think we're smarter now. And I think although we did an amazing job of reacting, I think that many have been proactively looking at potential second, third waves coming through and how we would respond. So I think that's certainly my nearsighted prediction. I think long-sighted, I think it's going to open up a lot of avenues for this industry, and I'm a firm believer that from a sales perspective, this industry is really just opening up to more competition, and as the population ages, I think this is a very good industry to be in, and I think that you look at the conversation around technologies, you look at the conversations around education and the questions and the relationships, it's just all coming together so quickly that I think it's just going to open up a bit of a Pandora's box on all these different tools and ideas and processes that are going to come. So I think it's going to be pretty exciting over the next 12 to 18 months.
Thanks, Jason.
Yeah, on my end, I think in 2021, senior housing sales will be more in the spotlight than it's ever been before, and it'll be more critical than ever before. What we're going to see is lower penetration rates, right? Move-ins down 20%. That means we're all competing over about 80% of what we normally would be. On top of that, below the revenue line, we've got increased expenses, right? The cost of hiring frontline staff has gone up significantly, and that's a rising floor, right? So it's not like at the end of 2021 we can say, okay, well, thanks for helping us through the pandemic. We're going to cut your wages by $2 an hour now. It doesn't work that way, right? That's a permanent change. And the cost of, I don't know if anybody's done community-wide testing, but that's an expense that really adds up, and it's necessary, and it will continue to be so. So what that means is compressed margins. And so, that adage of sales cures all. I think there'll be a lot of pressure on sales teams to continue occupancy driving upward, even if flat is the new up, like it was in the recession. But yeah, I think that at the end of 2021, we may find ourselves in a similar position. However, with this comes the 2 to 3 years after that, I think we'll see a lot less competition entering the market, a lot less units coming online, because the cost of building has gone up as well. 60 days ago, I want to say the cost of lumber was 240% what it was prior to the pandemic. So there's going to be a lot less construction activity probably in the near term, and that won't really matriculate until 3 to 4 years down the line. So there's going to be another, for those who said, hey, virtual tours aren't my thing, I would really encourage you to learn how to effectively run them, because I don't think they're going anywhere. I think that this is the normal we'll be living in throughout 2021, with a very, very bright light, as Jason mentioned, at the end of this tunnel.
Yes. Well, thank you both so much for your thoughts, for your comments, and I think that certainly it's been quite a year. It's not over yet for everyone. There's a lot of things to come, but one of the things that I see literally everywhere is that it is very inspiring to see sales teams. They want to continue to help those prospective residents, and we know that this is a group of people that are isolated, and now more than ever at home. Many of those resources and things that that they relied on, they don't have access to. So I think for the future of senior living, my hope, and I can see it already, is that we are learning how to position ourselves much, much more effectively to talk about what is the value proposition of senior living. And we're learning how to connect with people where they are, not necessarily where we want them to be. So you both, absolutely wonderful. Thank you for your time. We're in our last few minutes here. Are there any questions? I'm seeing a couple comments coming up here. Brigitte, thank you so much. From a sales leader perspective, being remote is allowing them to coach more and coach the field sales teams more consistently versus flying and traveling everywhere. So that's true. You can hop on a Zoom just like this. And then a question out to everybody from someone in the audience said, are organizations open to keeping tours scheduled versus allowing walk-ins? That's interesting. Have either of you seen any differentiation with that? For keeping tours scheduled versus just letting people walk in the building? How do you approach that?
Yeah, to the greatest extent possible, we would like to know when people are coming in those markets that we can allow tours, because it allows us to, again, make sure that everything is safe and all the right processes are in place. If somebody does walk in the door, we don't shoo them out, but we want to make sure we've got an area for them to be in while we ensure that everything is safe.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I certainly agree. You hit that exactly. I mean, we wouldn't turn them away, but the preference is on scheduling a tour, exterior signage, anything to do from a marketing perspective, directs them to schedule a tour versus historically it might have just been, walk in anytime. I think not only I think the comment was, balancing the schedule of the sales team. I think it's also just a matter of controlling too much outside entrance into the residence and controlling that environment.
Right. And there's been so many creative things, I think, that have been done in terms of meeting people either off-site or, close to the property. I was just at a property in a major city yesterday, and they literally go, seasonally we can right now, but they go right across the street when someone comes in for a walk-in, where they're able to just kind of sit down, and it's more for setting the stage for that prospective resident or family member and preparing them for, okay, so if you do come in the building, here's what's going to happen, here's what's to expect. So I think the more flexible that we can be as an industry, that it doesn't have to be in the building, but and it's a really good question that someone posed there in the chat is, it's a tough situation. It's highly stressful to say, I'm going to walk into a community for the first time. So if they do, what are other options?
You've certainly raised a new challenge for us in the weeks ahead of us, because we've enjoyed having those outdoor conversations. Waking up to snow where I was yesterday is changing that quite a bit, because we need to get them back indoors, and how we're going to overcome that will be a challenge.
Yeah, I heard it gets kind of cold in Canada, huh? Well, thank you both so much. Thank you to everyone who shared their questions in the chat. I'll be sending out this recording to everyone, including those who couldn't make it. And Jason and Andrew are excited. They're going to share their information with all of you. So if you have questions, the whole idea behind this would be to be able to connect us all together. So please feel free to pick their brains or just reach out to them if you have any follow-up questions. So thank you everyone so much for joining us. It's 3 o'clock right on the nose. So everybody have a great rest of your day, and I appreciate you joining us.
Thank you, Jen, for putting this together.
Thanks all.
Thank you.